kupiga simu ikaingia mteja. So vile iliingia mteja, hapo sasa ndio shida iliingilia because he threw me out. Remember, nimetoka kwa bafu niko na towel. So wakati nilirushwa nje, by the way hata ikuwa struggle kunirusha nje because I was unaware. So the towel imeanguka kwa nyumba, nimeiacha kwa nyumba. So na mimi bila nguo niko nje.
Stuck naked outside. Yes.
I'm trying to get in the house, but anafunga mlango. At this moment niko chini, nakumbuka sasa ile maji moto. Na kumbe wakati anasema hivyo ashaiendea, ameishika, ameiweka kwa jug. Na sasa nguo sina kutoka waist kwenda chini, but juu niko na nguo. And then anasema leo lazima nitakuchoma. He was holding the water.
Tuko family, is it too late to tell you Happy New Year? Anyway, my name is Kingori Wangeshi. Welcome to today's episode of Tuko Talks, and our guest today is called Grace. She will take us through what she has been for the last 15 years in marriage, including being shamed in public and other phases of trauma that she has faced. Let's welcome Grace. Grab your notebooks, guys. You have lessons to draw from this conversation. Grace.
Yes.
Sisi ndio Tuko, hapa ndipo penyewe. Karibu sana.
Asante.
Grace ni nani?
Grace. Okay, my names are Grace Muthoni. I'm a mother of 2.
Yes.
I'm 37 years old and a single mom.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do we begin right away? What do you do?
I'm a hairdresser and a nail tech as well.
Awesome.
Yeah.
At the end, you will give them your contact so that they can get in touch with you for
It's okay.
For that service.
It's okay.
But let's get right into the story. Just as we were talking on the phone, how long have you been married?
I've been married for 15 years. 15 years.
Yes.
And talking of 15 years, these are 2 marriages. Yeah.
The first one, how long did it last? And why did it end?
Okay, the first one was like 2 years. Minimum of 2 years. And it ended in a very tough way. We never planned that it will end. But things happened that we couldn't handle. Specifically me, myself. Yeah, this man was good at first. But later, he started the habit of using drugs. Talking of drugs, I'm talking of alcohol, marijuana, and all sorts of drugs, cigarettes. And from that time he started using those drugs, everything changed.
Let's call them substances.
Yes. So at this point, I was pregnant of my firstborn son. And life became tough because we could quarrel, fight all the time. Most especially at night. When he come back, he's drunk. And it was not easy for me. So I decided to handle it because at this time I was pregnant. I couldn't do anything. I said, let me stay. But the situation became worse because I remember one day he went out there and drank there's a particular medicine. I don't know what it's called. He used to take
a substance.
Yeah, substance. And he took it together with alcohol. And then he was brought home by friends, and one of his cousins totally broke out. He couldn't even do anything for himself. He couldn't walk. He couldn't even speak. And when they came home, I welcomed them and asked them if he's sick so that we can take him to the hospital. But they told me he's not sick. It is that substance that he took. So he was laid on a sofa set, and there he slept for 3 days.
3 days?
Yes.
Without waking up?
Yes. All this time I wasn't comfortable because I thought something wrong had happened to him. I used to call that cousin of his to come and check on him. And I used to tell him that what if he doesn't wake up? We need to take him for a medical checkup so that we know what is the issue. But the cousin told me, no, he's not sick. Believe what I'm telling you. Is that substance, it means he took much of it. So give him time, he will wake up. So these 3 days, it is now that I've already delivered the baby. He was 3 months. And now he has slept there for 3 days. He couldn't even wake up to go for a call, short call, wrong call, or anything. Even turning, I was the one who used to turn him. And this situation was not good. I was having fear. Like, what if he doesn't wake up? What about his family? What will I tell them? So I called his mom and I told her the story. But he said, if the cousin says he will wake up, then let us give him time. So after 3 days, he woke up confused. He couldn't do anything. And I remember what he asked me the first time he woke up was, Grace, where am I? Grace, when is today? Because he slept on a Sunday. He woke up on a Thursday.
What? Those are not.
So he was confused, totally. He was lost. And I told him, today is on Thursday. And he's like, why am I here? Why did I not go to work? I told him, no, you couldn't go to work because you slept. You overslept. So I called the cousin again and told him that he's awake. And this time he tells me, no, what you'll do, don't give him something. Give him something to eat or to take, but don't give him something hot. If he drink or eat something hot, he will go back to the same situation. So I tried my best. I gave him cold things. And that day, he spent the whole day in the house. And now he bathed and he refreshed up. Now in the evening, that's when he regained his senses completely. And he was like, now, how will I tell these people that I failed to go to work because I slept? And I told him, no, don't worry. Just wake up in the morning, go, explain to them. Maybe they will understand. But this day I sat him down and I told him, no, whatever you are doing is not helping you or us, or even it's not good for your health. But I think he kind of got addicted to these drugs. He never stopped. So the scenario continued. Every time his beatings, every time his threatenings. I remember after that, he went, okay, now the baby now is big. He's around 8 months. And he went and bought those drugs. Personally, I have never seen those drugs. But this time, he has come with the drugs and put them on the table in the house. And I was like, the baby is now trying to touch or trying to take the tablet to put in his mouth. And I'm like, which medicines are these? So for me, I thought it is Piriton because they looked like Piriton. So I took the medicines and threw them away because if the kids take them, it's not good for him because he's not sick. So I threw the medicines away, the drugs away, sorry. And after that, when he came back, he was very angry at it. Where are my drugs? And I said, no, I misplaced the drugs because the kid wanted to take it. And I don't know which kind of a drug they are. They might harm the kid. So that time we started fighting, a very bad fighting. And then after fighting, he went, because he was also drunk that time. He went, and when he came back, I was out to look for something for the kid to eat with my baby. Now, this time he came with acid and put it in the house. But the good thing is that when he was coming back to the house, he met this cousin of his, and now the cousin asked him, what is this that we're holding? And he tells her that this is an acid and Grace will know today who I am because I want to pour this acid on her.
What?
And then the cousin is like, why? Why should you do that? And he said, no. He took my drugs away and I need them. There are two things. Either she gives me the drugs or I pour this acid on her. So as I was on the way, because for him, he proceeded to the house with the acid. It was 5-liter jerrycan. Now, when I was on the way, so the cousin was not comfortable about it. So she was looking for me. And when she met me on the way, she told me, no, Grace, don't go to that house. And I'm like, why? She told me that your husband was here and he has gone to that house and he has acid with him. If you go there, you and this boy, you will face it, because he said that he has to do it. So I didn't go because of fear, and I knew it might be true, and I knew he can do it because those drugs kind of make him like a bad person, so he can do anything. So I didn't go. I went to the cousin's house, and now I asked her, now I want to cook for the baby. What are we going to do? Now the cousin tells me that we should go to the police station so that they come and arrest him and take the acid away. Because if we go there, including that cousin, he will pour the acid on the three of us. So that's what we did. We went to the police station, and by God's grace, we got a policeman. We went with him in the house. It was very true. The policeman found that acid. In fact, it was well set, because now it is, some is in jerrycan. The other one was poured somewhere, ready for me. If I come in and then it's poured on me. So he arrested him and carried that acid. So me, at this point, I am in the house. I'm left in the house and I'm cooking for my baby. But later in the evening, he came back. So when he went to the police station, according to what he told me, because we didn't follow up for us, he told me that he was beaten, and he was asked why he wanted to do that. And at some point, they asked him where he gets the drugs, and he took them there, that place. So he came back and apologized and said, no, Grace, I'm sorry. I won't repeat this again. I don't know what came over me. And I said, it's okay. So we continued. But the fights, the night fights continued every time, because he won't stop these drugs. It is continued for a long time. Now the baby is around 1 year. And during these fights at night, there is something that he used to tell me. Don't you ever think that one day you leave me, because if you do, I'll make sure I spoil your face. He used to say it repeatedly. But for me, I thought it's maybe he's drunk. I thought maybe it is because he's angry. But later, he came to do it. It happened, and that's what made that marriage to end completely.
What did he do?
It was one day, he went, it was on a Sunday. He went and drank. We were in the house. Later, I joined the cousin in her house, his cousin. And that's where he will find us, because he went to the whole house and find we are not there, me and the baby. So he came to the cousin's house and started quarreling, like, why are you here? And I told him, no, this is your cousin. Coming here is not like it's a big deal. We normally comes here and you have no issue with it. No, this time we didn't know that he had a razor blade in his wallet. Now, in the middle of that conversation, like that argument, the cousin is also in the argument, like, why are you asking her? Why? Coming here is not a bad thing. That's when he removed the razor blade in the wallet. We never saw it, me and the cousin. So by that argument, like he cut me in the face here.
That scar.
This scar here. And I didn't feel any pain. I didn't know I was cut. But the cousin screamed so hard, and I'm like, she was like, Grace, you are cut. And I'm like, where? I can't feel any pain. She's like, you have been cut and it's deep. So by that time, I asked the cousin. Now he cut me and ran away, so he's not there. But I could feel the blood stains, but no pain. So I asked the cousin to assist me with the mirror so that I can see. When I saw it, I fainted because it was so deep. And now the cousin has to look for someone to leave the baby with so that he can take me to the hospital. So she took me to the hospital and I was treated that day like a first aid, and I went back home. This time he won't come back. He ran away completely. And now I have, it's me with my baby. But that night, because I slept in the same house, I didn't sleep. I had fear. And because I didn't know whether he will come back at night.
Complete his mission.
Yes. But by God's grace, he didn't come back. He ran away because he didn't know what action I have taken. He was fearing the police. He was fearing to be arrested. So the following day, with my wound, I looked for another house somewhere else because I could feel that in that house I'm not safe. Remember this incidence of acid. He might come back with it again. He might come back and do the worst. So I was not having peace. So I decided to shift. And this time I won't tell the cousin where I am because he might follow her. So I shifted with my baby. And I started staying. For him, he ran away. I didn't see him again. But when I'm in this house with the baby, this wound was not well nursed. So it started growing. It grew at a very fast rate. And I could feel itching. So someone advised me to go back to the hospital because if I stay with it, it will be a very big wound. So that's when I went to Kenyatta Hospital, and they did operation on me. So when he cut this part, he also cut the ear. The ear was cut and the piece was down, was out. It wasn't hanging, it was out completely, but the end. So when I went, so the growth is here and as well in the ear. So when I went to Kenyatta Hospital, they did an operation on me. I don't know what they did with this ear to a point that it came back. And for this, because it was something that was deep, also they did something with it, because right now you can see it is like, it wasn't like this, it was something that was inside, and then now it has the growth now. But I was treated, and I thank God because my face, at least, I recovered. Yeah, the growth is normal. And now he's gone. The marriage ended that day. I've never seen him. And it's now my life and my baby. Yeah.
So that is how your first marriage ended?
Yes.
And it left you with a constant reminder, a scar on your face?
Yes, scar. And trauma of the acid, because it took me long to forget what would have happened with me that day. And again, the scar. Even today, as I see it, I still remember. Yeah.
Okay. What duration did you take a break so that you can get into the next, onto your second marriage?
Okay. After the first marriage ended, I moved out with my kid, as I have told you, the boy. And now, life is not easy because I have no job. The baby is not big, it's still small. So I used to wash people's clothes so that I feed the baby and pay the rent. And it was all was well with me because I needed peace. And I couldn't stay in that marriage. It's better that I live a hustling life or a tough life, but not in danger.
And you're peaceful.
A peaceful
and
life.
Safe, yes.
Yeah. So I was okay. So I stayed for 1 year alone with my baby. But at the end of that 1 year, I met another man. This man, I used to know him when I was living with my baby. And after like 6 months, we get into a relationship. To me, this one was like, he's a good person. He's peaceful. He doesn't have that quarrel. He's using any substance or drugs. He's peaceful. And I needed that peace.
Yes.
So I loved him. And we moved in. We went home. We went to his home. And all was well.
Yes.
So after some time, I conceived the second baby, my second born. And when I was pregnant is when I realized that he had a character that I couldn't know. He was hiding it. And how I'll come to know is the sister who will tell me. The sister one day told me that, Grace, do you know that your husband is a gambler? I say, no, I don't know. So the sister tells me that he plays the cards. I don't know how to call it, the one those cards, and it was true. I didn't ask him when the sister told me. I took my time. But he used to come late. He could get out of work and pass that somewhere of the gambling. So at one point, I'm waking up, I don't have a phone.
Your phone?
Yes, it's not in the house. And I'm like, where is my phone? Okay, I'm not asking him because he's not there. So that day, I didn't see my phone. I looked for it in the whole house.
And this is after how long how long in marriage?
It's around 8 months because now I'm pregnant, and the pregnancy was around 6 months.
Okay.
So I don't have a phone. In the evening, I'm coming and asking him, did you by any chance take my phone? No, I didn't take your phone. Where is it? I mean, we are 2 in the house. The baby cannot take the phone. He denied. But later, after 2 days, he came to tell me that I took your phone to the gambling.
What?
Yes.
And why is that?
He went there with money, and the money was...
It ended.
It ended there. And now he didn't have money for anything. So he wanted to take the phone there so that
security.
he can, so that he can be given small money. And in this case, he cannot take his phone because he's working with it. So the only available phone is mine.
And you're only 8 months
Yes.
in that marriage?
Yes. So I said, it's okay, but you could have told me. Because now, yesterday I didn't have peace. I was looking for the phone all over. And again, you came, I asked you, you denied it. So I decided to let it go. After all, he will buy the phone. He will get money and buy the phone. And that's what he did. After some days, he bought the phone again. But when he realized that I know he's gambling, he stopped hiding it. He could go there and spend the whole night gambling.
An entire night?
Yes. He's from work. Like, I'll see this morning, I'll see him this morning. I'll see him tomorrow in the evening. Because he cannot come back home in the morning. He will sleep, gambling, then go to work direct. The behavior became weird. I didn't like it. And I knew him as a good man, as someone that I can trust him with my life, because I got peace in him, so I thought everything was okay. But this time, he could even wake up and disconnect the TV and go with it.
As collateral security for
Yes.
loan.
Yes. And then he was very wise. He will send me out because he doesn't want me to see him disconnecting the TV. He'll tell me, Grace, go and get something for me. Then he'll just disconnect the TV and go. By the time I'm coming back, I'll think someone has stolen the TV because I'll find my baby, no TV. And I'm like, where is your father? But now the baby cannot even explain it. So it became worse. At some point, I remember I was about to get out of that marriage because of that gathering, because I told him, you see this gathering, we cannot do anything when you are, like we cannot progress in life when you are doing it. He had a good job. He was well, he was okay. But the problem was this gathering. At some point, I tried my best, and I think God helped him. He stopped. Now I'm having a son. The son is now 3 months. Now he has decided I'll stop this thing. And I was pushing him. Like, we need to build, we need to do this, we need to do this. Stop this thing that you are doing. It's not good. And in fact, we built a very good home in his home where he's born. And now this gathering thing, it ended. But after that, he's not gathering, he's working, he's okay financially. But I'm in the house. He developed another character of, I'll provide, I'll leave money for food when I want. Not because I don't have, but something small, of which in marriage there are always some things, like it's not peaceful all the time. Maybe I have made a mistake, maybe he has made a mistake. Yeah. So at this point, he wants me to beg him for food. At some point, he could pretend that he's angry when we are approaching end month, so that he go and not pay rent. I have now 2 children. I'm not working. Life became tough again, and I started again washing the people's clothes, of which he didn't like it, because he was saying that he doesn't like me going to wash people's clothes, because what will people say about him? Yeah, he didn't like it, but I could hide and go and do it. Not because I too didn't want to do it, but because I know anytime you will get angry, you won't leave anything for these children to eat. So I continued while I was hiding. But now when the small baby was 1 year, I said, no, now I need to work. At least let me look for something I can do. And I got a job in a company. It was a Chinese company, industrial area. I know you know that place. I started working. At first, he didn't have anything with it. But as time goes by, he's like, no, you need to stop working. You can sit down and raise these children. And I'm like, it's okay. I've not refused to raise them. But again, you leave money when you want. At least let me work for them. No, I don't want you to work. Now, this is the time that he will start following me to the company where I'm working. And he could enter to the company and start fighting. Go home. I don't want you to work.
At work?
Yeah, at work. And now people are like, what is this? To a point that fight continues, to a point that the Chinese said, no, we are tired of your dramas. If your husband doesn't want you to work here, it's okay. We can look for someone else. And that's how I stopped working in that company. Still, I'm back in the house, but the behavior will still continue. You want to provide when you want. Sometimes we all make mistakes. Sometimes maybe I might be on long. But what about these innocent children? What have they done to you? No, let me be. It's okay. Now the job is spoiled, so I'm back to the washing clothes again. This situation was not comfortable for me. I felt like, no, did I make the second mistake? But I said, no, he's not a bad man. At least let me stay. So after another 1 year, I got another job. This one, I'll work at night in a company still. I'll work at night 1 week And 1 week during the day, I sat him down and I said, no, please let me work. I need to work. He agrees. And he had no problem with that I am working at night, because you cannot change the schedule of a company. And he agrees. Now this one particular day, he will follow me at night in the company, claiming that I don't go to work at night. I go somewhere else. But I don't know where he got it from, because he entered in the company and he found me there. He created chaos.
At your workplace?
Yes. Everyone was like, Grace, what is this? And I'm like, staki hata kusikia. Like, because I know him. So that day, see, nothing happened like kufukuzwa job or anything. Those people understood me. But again, in the same week, he will follow me again. This time it is raining heavily. Nimevaa jacket. You see, venye watu wanaingianga kwa Muhindi ama Mchina wakiwa like a group, mlango inafunguliwa mnaingia wengi. I'm in the middle of people na nasikia nimevutwa kutoka nyuma, the jacket. So he was there, I didn't see him. Amenivuta, nimeanguka to a point my knee was injured. Juu nilianguka nikapiga magoti kwa mawe, mahali kulikuwa na mawe. And people are like, who is this? Nani huyu anasubua Grace? He was about to be beaten by people. But now, they were hidden saw it in the camera. Waliona hiyo kisanga yote, because unaona ni commotion kwa watu, katikati ya watu. So they followed up with the supervisor. Nikaambiwa, this job, you won't do it again. Hatuwezi kuwa, if you cannot sort your things out there, we don't want anything. Because if you get injured in the company will be in the problem. So, hiyo story ikaisha hivyo, hiyo kazi. The second job ikaisha. I'm back to the house.
So why doesn't he want you to work?
Reason, it is, I don't know. For him, he has no specific reason why you should not work. But we will come to know it after the story. Yeah.
What was he doing?
He was alikuwa watu wa delivery. Alikuwa na deliver hizi vitu, foodstuffs, nyanya, vitunguu, those things. Na alikuwa na shop of the same. Yeah, somewhere stasema, but na pia alikuwa Shylock. Alikuwa na kopesha pesa. Yeah, he was okay. Yeah, I won't say that wakati tulikuwa in good terms, I never suffered. Because hata nimwambie nataka hivi, he'll do it. But the only problem is when you are not in good terms. And because of that, he used to take advantage of, like, atuelewani, like, kila saa. So hii ni kazi ya pili imeisha. I struggle and get another job in the company. Kampuni mingi huko ni za Korea, Wahindi, wa China. So I got in a Korean company. Sasa hapo nafanya tena usiku na mchana. Now the babies are big. Yeah, they can go to school. Because huyu mdogo alikuwa 3 years na ule mwingine sasa alikuwa 5 years. So walikuwa naenda shule. And nimepata tena kazi ingine ya mchana usiku. Na every time I could get a job, I could ask him first, because I know he might not agree. Na si ati ni kumuuliza, I beg him for him to allow me to work.
For permission to go and
yes. Work. Na akakubali. This time, oh God, he will come. Okay, mimi niko kazi usiku. Nimepata kampuni nyingine 1 week usiku, 1 week mchana. Na nimemuuliza, amekubali nifanye. So this time nitaenda kazi usiku. So in the morning nitakuja kwa nyumba. And now I have someone who is taking care of the children. So nitapata watoto wameenda shule. Hata kama ni hizi nini playgrounds nini wameenda shule, hawayuko kwa nyumba. And now for me I'm sleeping in the house. Na I didn't know, like a day like yesterday alikuwa kwa simu yangu. Na akachukua namba ya one of my cousins, a male cousin. Akaiandika somewhere in a piece of paper na akaenda nayo. So during the day I was sleeping, akakuja. Akatoa airtime akanikia kwa simu yangu. Akaniambia, Chris, leo nimeambiwa nikuweke credit. Nikamwambia there's no problem.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, so akachukua ile number. So I saw the number and it didn't bother me because I know the number. Akaiweka kwa simu yangu. Kuweka kwa simu yangu. This time ndio nimetoka tu kwa bafu. Sijavaa hata nguo. Juu nimetoka tu kwa bafu na yeye akaingia. We are now talking like nimekuja nimekuwekea credit nini. Nimesimama tu. Akaeka ile credit and he dialed that number. Inatoa kwa juu anaweka kwa simu yangu inatoa tu jina. Na akaipiga. Kupiga simu ikaingia mteja. So vile iliingia mteja, hapo sasa ndio shida iliingilia because he threw me out. Remember, nimetoka kwa bafu niko na towel. So wakati nilirushwa nje, by the way hata ikuwa struggle kunirusha nje because I was unaware. So the towel imeanguka kwa nyumba, nimeiacha kwa nyumba. So na mimi bila nguo niko nje.
Stuck naked outside.
Yes. I'm trying to get in the house, but anafunga mlango. That day I had a small kalama hapa niliumia. Mlango ilinifinya. Kwa hiyo kwa harakati mimi nataka kuingia na yeye anataka nikae nje. Now I'm outside. Najaribu niingie. Nyumba kuna mtu ananizuia. So pipeline, there are a lot of people. Wenye wanakaa pipeline, they know. Kuna watu wengi sana. Within a minute, unaweza pata watu more than 1,000. So this time, wakati nilikuwa narushwa nje hakukuwa na mtu. Because it was lunch hour. But, kuna huyu mtu mmoja sijui alikuwa anatoka wapi, akaniona. So vile aliniona, like, ni kushtuka alistuka, akapiga duru. Sasa na venye amepiga duru, ndio watu wamejaa.
And you're naked?
Naked. The way I was born. Na yako kwa nyumba ndani. But sasa yeye anafungua kamlango kidogo anachungulia. Then anafunga. Nikijaribu kupush mlango niingie, anaipush na nje. So watu wakaja. I could hear people saying that mimi kwa nini nakaa nje bila nguo. Because they didn't know kwa ile nyumba nimetoka kuna mtu. So watu wakaja sana, wa mama, wa baba, watoto. Kila aina ya watu. And I'm naked. I can't even cover myself because all what I'm doing is crying because in aibu. I feel so bad. I don't know what to do. I don't know where to go. Siezi ambia watu waende, waache kuniangalia. So, tukiwa hapo kuna mzee wa kijiji. Mimi sijui kama huwa wanapigiwa simu. Mzee wa kijiji alikuwa ndani ya watu wenye walikuwa hapo nje. So, akauliza what is happening? Akaniuliza mimi, kuna mtu kwa nyumba? Akaniambia yes. Nikamwambia yes, kuna mtu. So ndio wakamwambia afungue hiyo mlango na akikosa kufungua wataingia nayo. And that's how he opened the door. And after opening the door, mimi naambiwa niingie nivae nguo, still ananisukuma nje. Until hao watu wakasema no. Utaingia na wamama 5, uende uvae nguo kwanza so that we know shida ilikuwa ni nini. Na hiyo ndio nikapewa wamama tukaingia. Na bado hata kama niko na wamama bado na struggle kunifikia. So nikavaa nguo na mimi sikuweza kuongea. I was crying. Na wakati nilivaa nguo mimi hata I cannot tell you how many people entered that house. Juu watu waliingia wakaja kwa nyumba. Because everybody wanted to hear ni kwa nini mimi naenda nje bila nguo. So huyo mzee wa kijiji akamuuliza what was happening. Akamwambia this woman, kuna mtu amekuwa akiongea na yeye. Na huyo mtu niko na namba yake. Na nimepiga hiyo simu iko mteja. That means amemwambia zime simu. Mzee wa kijiji akamwambia it's okay, bring that number. Mzee wa kijiji akachukua hiyo namba. This time hakutumia simu yangu, hakutumia simu yake. Akapiga na simu yake. Kupiga, akauliza huyo my cousin, wewe unajua mtu anaitwa Grace? Akasema namjua. So my cousin was like, kwani Grace ako kwa shida? Aliuliza kwani kuna shida? Akaambiwa hakuna shida, but tunataka tu kujua unamjuaje. So my cousin akasema, Grace mwenye naongelelea is my cousin. Na huyu Grace mamake na mamangu their sisters. So wale watu walikuwa kwa nyumba walishikwa na hasira, wakaanza kumchapa. Walimchapa to a point that hata hawezi tembea, like he was beaten kabisa. Na akaambiwa na huyo mzee wa kijiji, akamwambia what you did was wrong. Kama ulikuwa na shuku your partner, there are so many ways that you can handle things without causing trauma
and humiliation.
Yeah, now you are blaming her and you are the problem. Hiyo namba hata kama ingezimwa, you could have continued keeping the number until uingie. Because even that cousin aliwaambia mimi mkitaka kukuja kwetu kwa mama yangu, akawambia mimi niko Gatondo na naitwa fulani. You just come and confirm everything. That is my cousin. Na at some point kuna wakati alisomea hata huku kwetu. So kama kuna any problem, nyinyi pigeni hiyo namba yangu, mnaweza pigia mamangu ama mkuje. Huyo mwenye anasema he doesn't believe in her, akuje kwa boma yetu. Hiyo story kaisha. So that day sikupata peace. I was traumatized. Now ilikuwa mbaya. Sikuweza kulala. I could see people, sijui ni kuota ama nilikuwa naona watu wananiangalia tu nikiwa ile scenario ya mchana na iona sasa usiku. But sikulala kwa hiyo nyumba because now the kids are back from school and I'm looking at them nashindwa mimi niwaache ama what should I do? But nikasema okay, hii alama hapa, he was forced anipeleke nini, it was breeding, he was forced anipeleke hosi na hangeweza. So alipeana pesa nikapelekwa na mama fulani hapo because kumbuka tayari amechapwa. So yeah, alichapwa kabisa, hakuwa na angeweza kunipeleka. So by the time mimi nimerudi kutoka hosi, watoto wamekuja, nikasema hapana, I won't sleep here. This place, how will you even, utaenda aje hapo kwa duka na kila mtu amekuona, ile aibu. So mimi nikatoka, nikaenda kwa my sister. Nikasafari, ni mahali nitapanda gari na nikaenda huko. Na according to what I was told, because this time tena tumeachana, hata kama turudiane huko later, nitakwambia. But this time tumeachana, but I was told na yeye pia hakulala hapo. Sijui ni kuogopa, aliogopa ama ile aibu pia ilimkujia, or maybe he was guilty or something. Hakulala pale. Alituma brothers wake wakakuja wakahamisha hizo vitu zote. Akahamia place ingine. Na mimi nimehamia, nimeenda kwa sistangu, si kwenda huko kukaa, ni ile nasikia sitakaa pale. And nilikaa kwa sistangu for 2 days and I said no, I'm not going back to that man. What he did was not good.
What about the children?
The children, I'm with them.
Okay.
Nilikuwa nafikiria kuacha lakini nasema no, I cannot leave them. Because mi nawaacha, nitawaachia nani? I better suffer with them. Let me go with them. So nikaenda na watoto na yeye akabaki. Yeye akahamishwa hiyo siku. Mimi pia nimeenda kwa sistangu, nikakaa I stayed there for 2 days na nikatafuta kanyumba. Nikapata, nikahamia na watoto wangu. Kumbuka nimekaa kwa sistangu, sikumwambia anything. But she could feel or she could see I'm not okay. Because me, I think when I'm not okay, it's tears zinakwanga all over. So I was thinking, najiuliza, kwa nini like the first marriage ended, someone alinieka alama. Now it's not alama, but it is torture, shame, a very bad one. So I was thinking like nini mbaya na mimi. Sasa to this point najiraumu. And I couldn't get answers. But I said okay, all is not lost. I can stay and raise these children without anybody. So nikaanza tena. Sasa kazi imeharibika. Remember sijaenda kazi for 2 days. Imeharibika. So nimerudi na watoto wangu, nimetafuta kanyumba, nimerudi kwa kufua. And this time I'm doing it like nasema ni sawa, let me do it. Hakuna mtu ananikataza. These children will eat, they will go to school. Na watakaa tu hiyo maisha Mungu anatuwezesha for now. I don't want to hear about anything about him. Na sitaki like anybody to do with someone.
Yes.
Wacha ni focus sasa na juu kama imeshindikana. So I stayed. By God's grace, after 6 months, hiyo kuachana, hiyo break up, kuna rafiki yangu alikuja akaniambia kuna kampuni ilikuwa inafunguliwa mahali. And so I went there. Nilikuwa naenda pale tu nipate tu kibarua tu ndio niweze kulea watoto. Mi sijui nini ilifanyika kwa ile kampuni. I got the job. Na sikuitishwa papers because mi hata si nimefika tu form 4. Na sikuitishwa any paper, but wakati it was a mzungu company na it was new. Wakati alikuwa anachukuana, I was seated somewhere far because I was also having my own stress. Sikutaka kuingiana na watu. So huyu mzungu alitoka kwa, there was a lot of people who were brought wenye walikuwa wameungana nini mambo mingi. But huyu mzungu kitu nilisikia akisema akiwa kule kwa gate alisema no corruption in my company. So alitoka tu kutoka ndani, akakuja tu penye nilikuwa nimekaa. Akanishika mkono. I was the first one mwenye alichukua akaingia ndani. But that day alichukua watu 8. So venye alinishika mkono akaniingiza kwa kampuni nikiwa peke yangu kwanza. Sikujua. I didn't understand what was happening. Mimi nikabaki kwa kampuni, akatoka akakuja na watu wengine 7 wa mama. So venye alikuja ndani mara ya pili, alisema alini point hata ajui naitwa aje. Akasema you would be my manager. Sijui nini aliangalia, I don't know. But nikajikuta huko. Sasa wale wengine 7 alisema you will be my supervisors. Still hakuwajua. So tukakaa pale, I was like, am I dreaming? Anamaanisha nini? But nikasema anyway, maybe Mungu alikuwa amepanga iwe hivyo. Na nikaanza ile kazi.
Miaka ya nzige inaanza kulipishwa.
Yeah. I was very happy about it. I went and called my mom, I called my sister with excitement. Na to be honest, life started changing. Maisha ikaanza kukua mzuri, watoto wanakula vizuri, wanasoma, sikuwa na shida ya rent, niko tu sawa. But still sasa sifikiri anybody, like ni mimi, kazi, watoto, hivyo. So nikafanya kazi pale. I worked for 6 months. Because after those 6 months is when now my husband will come looking for me. But all the time he was looking for me, but I think ile kisanga ya kutolewa nguo nilimblock. Sikutaka anything to do with him. So he could go to my sister's house, anaenda nyumbani, anawaambia nataka kuongea na Grace, wacheni tu niongee na yeye. At least hata kama hatutarudiana, at least anisamee. I think hiyo kitu ilienda ikamsumbua sana. So this time nilienda kwa my sister na nikampata huko. I don't know kama it was a setup for my sister, I don't know. But nilimpata huko. And akanisalimia, nikamsalimika tu. Akaniuliza how are you, how are the children? Nikamwambia tuko sawa, we thank God. Tukaendelea tu kuongea. And this time stress ziliisha, niko vizuri. So kwa nini ni keep grudges? So nikaona it's okay, acha nimsamehe. But nimwambia we go home. Aende akaelezea why he did what he did. And again I wanted him to meet the person he accused. So tukaenda tukafanya hizo mambo zote and then we went back together. This time now, because my life is okay, he won't even, I won't move to him. Yeye alienda akachukua zile vitu alikuwa nazo za nyumba, then kakuja.
Moved in with you.
Yeah. Kwangu sasa na watoto. Tukaendelea tukukaa vizuri. And I think hiyo kurudiana was the worst mistake I did. Because in less than 3 months alikuwa ameharibu hiyo kazi.
What?
Yes.
The same old behavior.
Yes.
Old habits die hard.
Yes.
Hii kazi ya manager.
Yes. And all was well. Everything was okay. That muzungu trusted me. Because he could send me anywhere. Even if we have visitors, because some visitors would come and they want to use Swahili. He'll tell me, stay behind. I want you to listen and tell me what they're saying. So I don't know what happened. I don't know what I did to this man to a point that kazi zingine ziliniuma, but that one iliniuma zaidi because that job was to change our lives, including his life. Because if I'm okay and I'm the wife, he's okay too. So what he did, this mzungu used to call me even when I'm in the house, because sometimes hajakuwa kwa kampuni na anataka kujua, today what did you do? So I never hide my phone from my husband. My phone had no password. Hakukuwa, na ndio unaona ako na access hata ya kuchukua number. I never, si kufanya anything fishy ya kufanya nikuwe na hizo mapata na mapassword. So mzungu akanipigia and tukamaliza kuongea na mzungu. He went back again and took the number of the mzungu. And this time,
you are boss now.
Yeah. This time he don't want to call. He'll take time. He'll take the number, keep it in his phone for some time. And again, he will make sure he knows where I work. So one day he will pretend that he has gone to work and then come back and follow me. Ahakikisha nimeingia kwa hii kampuni. So alinifuata, sikujua, akinifuata sikumuona. I never saw him because it was not the same day yenye aliharibu kazi. So amenifuata, alikuwa na cheza kadi zake vizuri sana. Amechukua namba ya mzungu. In case akose kujua kampuni iko wapi, he will call. Amenifuata, so sahi he doesn't need to call because he know the place. He will go there. So that day, just one day. Okay, we used to talk even with the other supervisors, and siwezi pigiwa simu like nitoke nje. Let me say, alikuwa anajua vitu kupitia maybe venye mimi naongea ama venye tunaongea kwa simu. But I think he wanted me to stop working completely. And this job ilikuwa inanipea pesa because I have this time nimeanza kufanya vitu hadi kwa nyumba, like I can buy, nikiona kitu si mzuri I can change it without even asking from him. Hiyo kitu I think ilikuwa inamsumbua. So it was on Monday morning. That day I remember nilikuwa nimebuy TV mzuri ya watoto wangu. I bought it on Sunday. So on Monday is when he will go to the company. Na nikibuy TV tumeenda naye kubuy TV. I didn't know like ilikuwa na shida. So on Monday, he will even carry that receipt to confirm to mzungu I'm stealing his money.
What? And you're getting paid anyway?
I'm getting paid. That mzungu was giving me money because let us say, not only salary, maybe because the company was for export. So he can send me maybe to cafes. He will give me money. The money, it doesn't, he can't give you fixed money. So let me say I had money. I was getting money even in other means. But the jealousy in him could not stop him from spoiling that one. So this Monday morning, he came to the office. I was in the production. I was doing something there. And then he came to the office. I don't know he's there. And now the mzungu asking him, who are you? I'm Grace's husband. And now mzungu won't call me the way he calls me to listen to other people's stories. He wants to hear from him. Why are you here? How did you know here? So, and he said, I'm Grace's husband, and I came here to let you know things that you didn't know about her. Sa mzungu akaanza kusikiza. Akamwambia, one thing, Grace is stealing from you. Secondly, they are planning. Kuna kitu alisema, we are planning with other supervisors behind mzungu's back. And then mzungu was very angry. Na mzungu vile alijua ule ni bwana yangu, I think alichukua hiyo maneno seriously. He took it seriously because he believed that my husband cannot lie against me. This is someone who loves you. So whatever he's saying is true. Again, how did he know the company? How did he get, because he saw him the number. I also have your number, I wanted to call you. And akaambia mzungu, I'm not lying, here is the receipt of the TV she bought yesterday, it's too expensive. Akamwonyesha ile receipt. But mzungu on that one of the receipt alisema, but I paid her recently. So hiyo I think you hakubai hiyo uongo. But again he was very angry at me. So mimi alikuja kwa production. Akaniambia, Grace, he was shouting, Grace, you remove my dust coat. I was wearing white dust coat because it was a food company. So you wear dust coat, you wear gloves, and you cover your hair and mask. So I heard him saying, remove my dust coat. So, and I was like, what is happening? I said you remove my dust coat. So nikatoa. Kutoa kwa watu. Hiyo kampuni was having 400 women. And it was during the day. Na hiki sangauti inafanyika kwa watu. And I'm like, I don't want to mention his name. I'm like, but we can talk about it. What have I done? No. Your husband was here. He said, you have been stealing from me. Chris, I trusted you from the first day I saw you. I didn't know that you can steal from me. But I'm like, but we can go back to the records. If it is true I've been stealing from you, we will know. Ask me from day one. Let us go back to the office and say, no, I don't want to hear anything from you. You have to leave my company. I had no option. But this time I'm going crazy because sikujua. Yes, na sikujua like he can go to that extent. Nikatoa ile dust coat, nikatoa mask, nikatoa everything. I went home.
So will you ask him?
This time I couldn't even ask because I feel like I'm done. I feel like I can do something very bad. I'm angry because we are human. I'm also a human. Why can you go to company? Why should I not go to your work and spoil it? I was very angry at it. Na nilikuwa nasikia nikiongea nitamuattack. Na tena kuna watoto and I'm like, sasa machozi ndo inaongea. I couldn't even talk. Tears. But now I try to look for mzungu because I knew I've done nothing. And mzungu akaniambia, no, Grace, there's no way your husband can come here and tell lies. That is one thing. Again, if you live with someone and he has been hearing the conversation that you are making, including the one for me and you, there might be kaukweli. I tried to plead with him, but he refused. Mzungu ni ule mtu hata kuforgive. Akishaambia akili yake iko hivyo na hivyo ndio ukweli, uwezi mtu wa pale. But hiyo kazi iliisha. Now, this time sitamwacha. Nitakaa hapo because now umespoil kazi yangu. Wacha tuishi sasa. I'm very angry at him. I don't want even to see him. Sitaki hata kumuongelesha, sitaki aniongeleshe. So for 3 days we didn't talk. But later, when I cooled down, nikamuita nikamwambia, why do you hate me so much? Why do you do all these things? The other time ulinitoa nje bila nguo. I forgive you. Then you are here in less than 6 months. Penye nilikuwa nalishia watoto. You have spoiled it. Ni nini hiyo nilikufanyia like you feel like you just want to make my life miserable? Hakujibu. Alisema tu, I don't want you to work. I want you to stay in the house. Kasema it's okay. It took me time to heal from that one. Nilikuwa namuona tu nasikia sijui nimfanyie. I could even wake up at night najaribu kuangalia what can I do to him. But again I thank God because I did nothing. Mungu alinipea hiyo neema tu like temper irudi chini. So I'm back again kufua nguo. Because
so
remember,
did he like you washing clothes or?
He didn't. But he wanted me to suffer. Let me say that.
Why?
he wants me to suffer because anytime I get a job, he will spoil it. Okay? And again, he has the money, he can help, he can provide. But every time I don't have a job, he's angry all the time, so that he has excuses not to leave the money or to provide. So I tried to sit down and try to understand him, but I failed.
That is emotional abuse.
I failed. Because if I do something, to you it's wrong. What is wrong with working? There's nothing wrong. The other day you called my cousin, claiming that I have a relationship with him. And you are proved wrong. Still, you are not learning. To this point, nilikuwa najua tu hiyo ndoa haita last.
Ilikuwa after how long? Because you stayed, from the calculations, about 13 years.
Yes. It was now, I think, 5 to 6 years. Watoto bado ni wadogo. But this time, wakati sasa aliharibu hiyo, I decided to stay. Mimi pia nilikubali kukuwa miserable venye nataka. I decided like, wacha nikae venye unataka. This time, sasa hata siendi, sitafuti hiyo kazi sasa. You do what you want. If you want kuachia pesa wa watoto, it's okay. I kind of got tired. But again, sasa sijui nifanye nini. I remember he could go to work and anakuja tu ananigonga na pesa like 20,000. Ananigonga na pesa ananiambia, you foolish woman. Unaweza enda uko hivyo nje utafute a single room, you live with your kid. I'm tired of you. And I'm like, you're tired of me. It's okay to get tired. But what about the job that you made me lose? What about these children? It became worse. So, all this time, I'm a church person. But to some point during these years, I stopped going to church because he never liked anything to do with church. It was a question mark to me. Why going to church is not a crime? Why is it that someone is not comfortable when you're going to church?
Okay, he might not go, but you should be.
Yeah, there. For me, how is it affecting you that I'm going to church? So I could go to church in the morning and see, obvious nikienda kwa kanisa. Either I put my phone in silent or I switch it off.
Why?
Because you see kanisa kuna noise. So even if someone calls you, utasikizana na ule mtu. And again, I'm here to talk with my God, not to wewe ukinitaka, still I have time for you. Na si ati nakaa kanisa the whole day, at from morning to 6, no. Maybe nitaenda saa 2 kanisa, by saa 7 ama saa 8 nitakuwa nimetoka. So by the time naenda kwa kanisa tu hivi, prayers have started, my phone is on silent. That's when he will call. I'll find like 20 missed calls. Na maybe nimechukua simu niangalie maybe ni saa ngapi. Nitapata 20 missed calls. Not only missed calls, message mrefu. You can read it for hours. Ya kuniambia unakataa kushika simu because haukwenda kanisani, because bra bra bra, hizo mambo zote. And now I am reading this message, I'm in the church. My mood is spoiled. What will I do? I'll take my children and go back home. Ikajirudia for months na nikasema acha nikae kwa nyumba. But later nikajiuliza, why should you abandon God because of someone? You go to church because you know the purpose of you going there. So it's not about him. Salvation is personal. So decide, what do you want to go to church, or do you want to stay in the house and praise this person? Again, if you don't take these children to the church, to the house of God, they will how will they grow? On the other side of them, because sometimes you go because of this innocent, because you want them to be nurtured vizuri, because there is Sunday school, there's hizo mambo za Mungu. When you are in the house, wataanza kuona movies. Semi movie ni mbaya. People should not get me wrong.
Yes.
But they will watch hizo vitu zenye maybe hutaki wa watch. So nikaacha church, but nikakaa chini one day nikasema no. If this church ndio itatu separate, it's okay. But I've decided me and my children will be going to church. So nikarudi kanisa. this now the around 6th year now. Nikaanza kwenda kanisa. Nikakuwa pale nimeingiana na wamama. Nikakuwa pale niko kwa leadership. And I'll skip this all other parts because the story might be very long. Nikuja hapa in this one day. Ndio sasa itakuja kufanya tuachane completely. Nimeenda kwa mkutano ya church. Mkutano was in town. I won't say the place. Na ilikuwa sikukuu Eid Fitri. Eid Fitri normally inakuwa mwezi wa 4. So now the children are big. They are big people. They are big boys. And wameenda ushago. This time wameenda kwetu because we used to alternate. Kama maybe hawaendi kwao, they'll go to my mom's place. So wameenda kule na mimi tuko naye kwa nyumba. This day haendi kazi and nimemwambia mimi naenda meeting. Hawa na shida na hiyo meeting. Kwa mimi nimeenda meeting ya church mahali fulani. But I don't know it will take how long. But in case of anything my phone is on. So na nimemwacha kwa nyumba, nimeprepare lunch, nimeprepare kila kitu, nimeenda. Peacefully nimeenda. I'm in the meeting, sijaona call yake. But now kufika kwa nyumba jioni because I remember it was 7:03. Hiyo ndio masaa nilifika kwa nyumba. Ndio nilipata kuna maji inachemka kwa jiko
ya kupika ugali.
I didn't have any problem with the water. Wacha maji chemke. Because someone can think of maybe nataka kupika, maybe nataka maji inaweza fanya vitu mingi. I didn't have any issue with the boiling water at first. So vile niliingilia hii mlango ya mbele. Na that side ya hiyo mlango alikuwa amekaa karibu na hapo kwa hiyo mlango. And now the water is boiling somewhere. Nilikuwa nimeiona. By the time natoa sweater, nieke bag, nieke simu kwa kiti, ndio nilisikia amenisukuma. Na kunisukuma nikaangukia the other door that was back. Remember yeye amekaa hii mlango. Karibu na hiyo mlango, so alinisukuma nikaanguka hii mlango ingine ilikuwa na nyuma. And niligongwa. Though niligongwa ni kama nikakuwa confused na hiyo juu ilinigonga hapa. So sikupata venye nilianguka sikupata energy ya kuamka saa hiyo. This time sijui kuna kitu mbaya inaenda kufanyika. Na vile nimeanguka I was wearing trouser. So alinitoa ile trouser. Na hata hakungangana. Alitoa. Then the panty hata haikutolewa. Iliraruliwa, ilivutwa. And niliumia hiyo panty ikivutwa. And that's wakati anavuta hiyo panty, that's when he talked. Akasema utajua mimi ni nani leo. Hautakuwa ukienda unashinda huko nje, unakuja the time you want. Ndio utajua. At this moment niko chini nakumbuka sasa ile maji moto. Na kumbe wakati anasema hivyo ashaiendea, ameishika, ameiweka kwa jug. Na sasa nguo sina kutoka waist kwenda chini, but juu niko na nguo. And then anasema leo lazima nitakuchoma. He was holding the water. And mimi naangalia nyuma hii mlango siwezi fungua. By the time nifungue mlango hata nimwage ile maji. So mimi kwa bahati mzuri niliona mlango ya bafu na ilikuwa wazi. So by the time mimi hata sijui niliamka hapo chini aje, sijui like it was so fast. Nikaingia kwa bafu. Yeye bado amenifuata na ile maji. But sasa mimi nasukuma mlango, siku lock ile mlango, sikupata time ya kulock. So yeye anaisukuma na ndani na mimi nasukuma na nje. Na ameshika ile maji. So mimi nikiwa pale, I don't know ama ni kustuka kama ni nini. Me I started praying. No, na sikuomba ile ya polepole. Praying that like you are screaming. Nikaomba sana kwa ile bafu nikaambia God, if going to your meetings or to church is a problem, I expect you to save me from this. Because I cannot serve you and be ashamed. So lakini si ni kuomba but anasikia akiwa huko na watu wamekuja nje wamezunguka, lakini kule kwetu pipeline watu hawaingiangi kwa nyumba za watu. Like wanawatchingi wakiwa from afar. You can be killed inside that house but hakuna mtu atakuwa na courage ya kuingia. Not unless akuwe maybe ni hao watu wa nyumba 10 au ndio huwa wana ama waitwe na wale wako nje. So all this time sasa na push mlango, mimi na push nje. But I think ile kuomba na maybe akapush for long, mimi nasukuma nje na maybe maji kapoa or maybe akachoka. Juu aliniacha akaacha kupush ile mlango, but mimi bado nimeshikilia mlango, but I'm still praying. But remember wakati nilikuwa naenda nakimbia kwa bafu, niliacha simu kwa meza. And that's when he took, and I thank God because I left that phone in that table, because ilimpea kind of distraction. Aliachana na sasa kunimwagia maji, akaenda kushika ile simu. That day aliingia kwa simu akakopa credit of 1500 on my phone. Na akaanza kupigia watu. So alikuwa anapigia watu wagani? Randomly. Like akiona hii contact, akiishuku anapiga. And I could hear from the bathroom akiforce watu. Like unaniambia hujui Grace na naona mnaongeanga. Alitoa namba yako wapi? I could hear. And then alipiga hiyo simu for long. This time ya hii scenario, after kuharibu hizi kazi zangu mingi, is when I decided through help of someone I can, because sasa kazi sitaandikwa anaharibu. In that process nikasema kwa nini ni sifanye hair dressing, a skill that I'll move with it penye nitaenda. Wakati hii kisanga inakuja kufanyika, I'm going to school and he's aware of that. Juu hakuna kitu nilikuwa namficha. Nikamwambia let me do this course, maybe it will help me somewhere. Na hakuwa na shida nayo. So niko shule, nilikuwa nimesoma miezi 3 by then wakati hii kitu inafanyika. Na wakati nilikaa pale kwa bafu nikachoka juu aliongea na simu for long, for hours. Remember niliingia kwa nyumba saa ngapi? Saa 1. Saa hii naona ni saa 4. Nitoka kwa hiyo bafu saa 4, I was tired, sina nguo, kwa bafu kunakuwa na baridi. Then I'm also tired because wacha nitoke ile kitu itafanyika ifanyike to have prayed enough. So wakati nilitoka kwa ile bafu aliachana na simu. He started beating me. A very bad beating. Mimi alikuwa ananigongesha hiyo ukuta na nikienda kuamka ananigongesha kwa hiyo nyingine.
Sorry.
Alikuwa ananigongesha. Nikienda kuamka na nikanyanga. To some point I remember nilisikia na kama ana rukarukia kwa kifua yangu.
What?
Yes.
What were his intentions?
Oh, he could say, hizi nimemzoea, simsikizi. Hizo ndio vitu nilikuwa nasikia akisema, and this time anarukaruka kwa kifua yangu na I'm begging him to stop and let us talk. Kama nimekosea niambie, you did this and this. But he didn't. Alinichapa vita ingine mbaya sana. To a point hata kupumua inakuwa shida. Nilikuwa namwaga damu hata kwa uso. Nimefura, macho iko inaona. Both because alikuwa ananipiga hata ngumi. It was bad. Alinipiga vita mpaka leo huwa naikumbuka tu. Na wakati tukiwa kwa hiyo vita, someone called my phone, hawa watu wenye alikuwa anapigia. Na akaenda kushika ile simu. By God's grace, hapo ndio niliweza kuepukana na hiyo vita. Nikafungua hii mlango ya chini akiwa kwa simu. Hii mlango ya nyuma pole pole, because I was on that side. Nikaifungua pole pole bila ya kusikia. Na nikatoka. Nikakimbia. This time, sasa sina nguo kutoka hapa kwenda chini. But I didn't care about the clothes. I only wanted to save my life. So nikatoka nje. Wakati nitoka nje nilifikiria kama ananikimbiza, but hakuwa ananikimbiza. So mi nilikimbia nikatoka huko nje kwa so tulikuwa tunakaa 6th floor. So niliteremka kwa stairs bila nguo. Kulikuwa bado na movement ya watu. Hiyo ndio masaa watu wanatoka kwa maduka, ndio watu wanatoka jobs, but I didn't care about ati wananiona. Juu nilikuwa nafikiria ako nyuma yangu, na this time kama ako nyuma yangu akinishika, because hiyo kuattempt kutoroka angeniumiza even zaidi. So I ran away. Nikashuka huko chini, sina hata viatu na kulikuwa kunanyesha. Nikakimbia sasa, nikaenda na huko chini kwa maduka. Nilikimbia nikasikia I cannot move anymore. Nikimove I'll fall. Ndio nikastorm kwa shop fulani hapo, nilikuwa nauza manguo. I didn't know the owner of the shop. Mimi ni kuchoka tu, nilichoka na nikasikia hapa nikipita it's better kama ananifuata, kama ananishika nishike hapa mahali kuna watu. So nikaingia kwa hiyo duka. Hapo huyo mtu venye niliingia alistuka. He was a man. Alinipea nguo. Alichukua dress. Nilikuwa tu hapo, akanitupia nikavaa. Akaniambia I sit down first. Ndio nimwambie nirelax kwanza, juu sikuwa naweza kuongea, nilikuwa na hema sana. Nikikaa chini nikirelax, then I can tell him how he can help me. So nikakaa like 10 minutes. Ndio sasa nikapata nafuu, nikaweza kuongea. Nikamwambia what has happened. So I didn't know he was a pastor. Mimi nilistorm tu kwa duka. But akaniambia mimi sahi ni saa 5. Sahi sitakwambia uende maybe kwa relative. You don't have the phone. Kunanyesha na ni usiku. People might take advantage of you out there. Juu watu watafikiria ati ni kuchapa, watu watafikiria wewe ni mlevi. And haitakuwa vizuri kwako. So what I do, baba yangu ni hawa wazee wa nyumba 10. My little dad. Nitampigia simu, najua atakuja na hatakuja peke yake. So alifanya hivyo na wakakuja. Alikuja wababa 2 na wamama 2. So walikuja watu 4. So venye walikuja pale kwa ile shop wakanisikiza. Ndio sikuwa najieleza vizuri because of the trauma and kustuka na everything was messed up. But wakaniomba namba ya my husband now. Nikawapatia na akapigiwa simu, akaulizwa kama tunaweza enda kwa nyumba. Akasema ni sawa, tuende. So tukaenda pale. Mimi nilikuwa nafikiria watu wamenipeleka nichukue maybe viatu na simu so that I know where to go. Na hiyo si tabia ya watu wa nyumba 10. They want to go there and listen to what had happened. So tukakaa pale chini. All this time I'm crying like sina hata energy, hata siongei. Sasa nilikuwa nasikia yeye anawaelezea. Anaulizwa shida ilikuwa ni nini. Anawaambia bibi yangu anisikie. Nikimwambia aache kitu, kazi yake ni kanisa. Hiyo shule yenye anaenda staki aende. Nataka akae kwa nyumba aangalie watoto. So anaulizwa hizo vitu amungeongea bila vita. Anasema pana. Nimekasirika juu leo aliniacha akaenda a meeting, those church meetings, na akakuja late. Akaulizwa did you ask her what happened maybe there? Juu saa zingine inaweza kuwa ni jam all something happened. Akasema mimi siwezi msikiza. Na sitaki hata nieleze anything. Because kama ningemkataza kwenda hiyo meeting angekasirika. So hao wazee nilisikia wakimuuliza between hizo vitu umetuambia ni nini uko na shida nayo? Ni kanisa, ni yeye, ni shule, ama haswa unataka nini? So akasema kama nataka kukaa na yeye niache kwenda kanisa. Kama nataka kwenda na yeye niache shule. Watu tulikaa because me wakati nilikuwa naulizwa what do you want? Nikasema mimi I don't have any problem with anyone. But what I want is for me to get out of this house, because right now, if I die like right now, my children, what will happen to them? mtu kukasirika kiwango ya kwamba ananichemshia maji nichome, I think this is too much. I won't handle it. Sitaweza. I've tried so many things but imekuwa ngumu. Again, if you have a problem with me, why can't you sit me down and ask? Ama uniambie, I don't want you to do this and this and this. The time I told him that I want to go to the school, the hairdressing school, he didn't have any problem with it. And that's why I went. So hiyo kesi haikuisha. Walikaa au watu walitoka huko kwa nyumba yetu saa 9 ya asubuhi. And they said, sisi hatuwezi lala kwa nyumba yenu. Na wakamwambia, we are leaving her here because we cannot go with her. Na ujue if anything happens to her, hiyo kesi ujue ishafika kwa chief. Anything, akikuja complain aseme ulimfanyia hivi, wewe ndio utaulizwa na tutakutafuta. So na wale watu wakaenda, wakatuambia kesho asubuhi by 10 tuende kwa chief. So tulilala. Okay. Sitadanganya niseme nilala. Nilikuwa sijisikii vizuri because hiyo kukanyangwa na kifua ilikuwa inaniuma sana. Hizi macho hazioni, hiyo kugongwa natoa damu. Every part of the body was paining, including kwenye lidarua na ile pantia lidarua. So mi sikulala, but pia yeye hakulala. Nililala kwa kiti. And he kept on begging me at night, venye umeenda. But kwa nini unataka hivyo? Why can't you leave all these things and tukae pamoja? And this time I'm not even talking to him. Unaniambia nini ulikuwa unataka? Some hours ago you wanted to kill me. Like, so in the morning, hataki tuende kwa chief. Kaamka nikamwambia, unajua nini? We were told to go there. Let us go there and solve this thing once and for all. But me, I think I was tired.
At that point, I wanted just to go. But then tukaenda pale kwa chief. Akikuja kwangu, he's begging me. But tukienda kwa watu, he doesn't want me. So tukiwa pale kwa chief tulibishana sana. Anaulizwa na chief, what do you want? Anasema, mimi nataka aende. Siwezi ishi na mwanamke aniheshimu. And me I'm asked, nasema I'm okay with it. Again akisikia I'm okay with it, he's angry again. Why do you want to leave me? Like, it's like hajui kenye anataka. So this time, simu yangu kumbuka yeye ndiye amekuwa nayo from yesterday. Nikaambia chief, mimi nataka simu yangu because I'm not able to reach out to any of my relatives or my sisters. And right now I'm not okay. I need to go to the hospital. So mimi nataka simu yangu nipige. Aliambiwa nipe simu na kakatana, wakasema ni alinunua. Nikamwambia it's okay, even if you bought the phone, so nipe SIM card, at least I can borrow someone a phone. Ndio nipigie at least, yeah, I can make a call. Na alikataa nayo. But tukiwa tu hapo kwa chief, nikaona ameitwa hapo na mbaba mwingine, akapelekwa na hapo kando. Sijui waliongea nini. Akakuja akaniambia, twende home. Na akanipea shika simu, twende home. To me it looked weird because ulikuwa hapo ukisema unitaki. Ulikuwa hapo ukisema unipei simu. What has changed? Atumeenda hapo umekuja umenipea simu. So nikachukua simu. Na tukaenda. But before we go, huyo chief alimwambia kitu. I don't know you, I don't know her. But you are about to make a very bad mistake. This woman, ukimsikiza na kuongea kwake, she's making sense. But you seems like you are overreacting. Na again, you are confused, you don't know what you want. But chief akamwambia, I cannot decide for you. You are grown ups. You go and do what you want. But kitu hatutaki ni tusikie amekuja hapa with a complaint, umemchapa ama umemuumiza. So ule mzee venye alimuongelesha huko sijui waliongea nini. So we went back home. This time ananiambia usiende, don't go. Mimi tukaenda, tukakaa hiyo siku. Kukaa hiyo siku, mimi wakati nifika kwa nyumba, I went to the hospital. Now I have the phone and in my phone I had some cash. So nikaenda hosi, yakarudi kwa nyumba. But ukimwangalia he seems like ako confused, hata yajielewi. Na nikakuja nikakaa that day because pia sikuwa najisikia vizuri, nikakaa that day.
I think kulikuwa on Thursday. That day was on Thursday. Na Sunday watoto wanakuja because the schools are opening. So we stayed for those days but we never talked. Hakuna mwenye alikuwa anaongelesha mwingine. Me, I was healing my wounds zenye nilikuwa nimeumizwa, because even I cannot go to the hairdressing school because nimeumizwa. So on Sunday I have to get kids from town. Wamefika niwachukue niwapeleke kwa nyumba because tomorrow they are going to school. And this Sunday is the first day na yeye alitoka nje. Kutoka nje akanitumia message kwa simu yangu, kumbuka hatuongei. Akaniambia, ukae ukijua kesho tunahama. And now the children have just arrived. Na ni Sunday jioni tunahama. I was like, tunahama who and who and why? So sikujibu message. Nikasema, it's okay. These children of mine won't go to school. Wacha tukae kwa nyumba tuone ni tunahama aje. So they didn't go to school. So for him, very early in the morning at 6, he woke up and he wakes everybody up. Anataka kuchukua vitu aende. Okay, like anataka kupanga vitu juu tunahama. At this point mimi sijui niko pande gani. Am I part of the kuhama? Yeah. And I don't know my children wako pande gani. So wameanza kupanga, watoto wameanza kumsaidia. They are big boys. Na lakini haongei na mtu. Mimi okay, watoto wananiuliza, mami tunahama? Nawaambia yeye tunahama. But ni ile like I don't know what is, sitaki kuambia because sitaki pia niseme kitu ilete tena mavurugano kwake juu pia kwa hapo na anasikia. Nawaambia yeye. So wakapanga vitu, akatoa kila kitu kwa nyumba. The only thing aliacha ni manguo zangu na za watoto. Lakini hizi manguo pia kuna zile alibeba. I think alikuwa anapanga na haraka. So unapata nguo, unaona nguo fulani hakuna. But mingi ziliachwa na ziliachwa zimetapakaa kwa nyumba. Alikuwa anatoa kwa wardrobe akitupa chini. So he carried everything in that house including malazi ya watoto. Knowing very well aendi na watoto. So amepack kila kitu, watoto wamemsaidia. My job that time was to move from this point A to point B. Ndio kama ni kiti inachukuliwa I'm moving until nilibaki kama nimekalia floor. Vitu zote zimeisha. The only thing ziko hapo ni manguo na vitabu za watoto.
Watoto hakuenda nao.
Sasa watoto they think they are going. They're very innocent because they don't know what happened in their absence and I don't want to tell them. So wakati iliisha hakuambia mtu hata nimeenda, alitoka akaenda. Sijui vitu zilipelekwa wapi but alituacha pale kwa ile nyumba. Me now I'm saying, oh, it's okay. If this will give me peace, it's okay. But at the same time nahurumia watoto juu hawajui anything and I don't know what to tell them.
It's so confusing for them.
Yeah, for them. So hawajui hata kama ameenda. They are waiting for him to come for them. Now alishaenda but mimi nilijua ameenda. So tukiwa tu pale kwa ile nyumba yenye tumeachiwa tu manguo. There's a lady who came. Alikuwa anakuja, I think alikuwa she had paid for that house. Akakuja akaniuliza, amjamaliza kuhama? Na mimi nikamwambia, oh, wewe ndio akili iliniambia. Juu pipeline nyumba hazikaangi empty sana. So alikuja akaniuliza, nikamwambia, wewe ndio unahamia hapa? Give me only 5 minutes. Niokote hizi zote zimebaki then ukuje. So mimi hakuna anything, hakuna suitcase, hakuna, lakini nguo ziko, viatu ziko, vitabu ziko. You know what I did? Nilienda kwa jirani, kwambia sandie na gunia. So we put those things inside that sack and I put everything outside nyuma ya mlango ya mbele. And I'm like, I'm telling my children, nataka mfanye hivi, mkae hapa. I'm coming. Kwa sababu hii nyumba ishalipwa. Sasa ni saa 10. Kunanyesha, tutalala wapi? There is no way we can, because me I thought, because si nyumba inakuanga na deposit. I thought we have some time for us there. Kumbe all this scenario even ya maji moto alikuwa shaenda kwa ofisi akawaambia yeye halipi nyumba, tunakalia deposit. So it was something that was planned. It's not that I did anything that day. It was an excuse ndio apate vile ataenda. So he didn't want to tell me ananiacha ama anataka kuhama. Of which angesema hivyo it could have been better because hii maumivu yote ilikuwa ya haja gani?
Ama hakuwa anataka wewe umuache, alikuwa anataka yeye akuache.
Of which I was good at it because you cannot force someone to stay with you. So ameenda, sisi nyumba tumepata, hii nyumba hatuwezi kaa. Now the reality sasa ndio itani hit vizuri because my children might sleep outside. Now that is the worstest thing. Mtu anaweza ishi watoto wake. Like you don't know what to do. So mimi nikaambia watoto kaeni hapo. Nikaenda. I had some cash with me. And I thank God because if it were not for that cash, tungelala nje. Because hii nyumba, hakuna vile mwenye amelipa na nataka uendelee kukaa. So wakati nimeweka nguo kwa mangunia, nimeambia watoto nigojeni hapa, nilienda. But nilikienda nilikuwa naomba tu Mungu anisaidie nipate nyumba, watoto wasilale nje. I know we have nothing, hatuna blanketi, hatuna nini, but at least if we have a roof, hatutalala nje. So by God's grace nilizunguka na nikapata nyumba. It's now 6, I'm coming back. These children hawajakunywa chai, hawajakula lunch. The small boy is like, Mommy, I'm very hungry. Namwambia goja, nitakusort. But now they don't know what is like hata mimi na go through something because they know nothing about what happened. So nimepata ile nyumba, nimeilipa plus deposit. Na nimekujia watoto wangu, tumebeba ile sack, tumeenda kwa ile nyumba. Now tuko pale tunaangaliana. Wananiuliza, Mami, kwani dadi yako analeta vitu huko? Nawaambia msijali. Msijali, hata nilikuwa nawaambia atapiga simu because sikutaka wanene like wakuwe na stress ama waanze kuniuliza what ni shida. At this point mimi nalia but I'm hiding it. Then sitaki wajue kama nalia. So that night watoto walilala kwa floor. Mi personally sikulala because kumbuka bado niko na maumivu na tena but ibadeni ya watoto mimi ndio naibeba, like the pain mimi ndio naibeba. So kijana wangu mkubwa akaniambia, Mami, you don't want to tell us but it seems like daddy ametuacha. Kaambia don't worry, mambo sitaki kumwambia yes umeachwa, no, but namwambia usijali, mambo itakuwa tu sawa, don't worry. Anza, Mami, tutaenda shule aje? Kesho inafaa tuende shule. Naambia msijali. That time naambia msijali, nalia because naambia na sina hope. Sina hope ati wanaenda hiyo kesho. Sina hope where I'll get the school fees. Sina hope ata kulala kwa floor inaniumiza. So that night kijana wangu mkubwa aliniambia, Mami, what I'll do, nitavaa nguo tu mingi. Like say juu nilikuwa nimwambia walalie, like na pengia hizo manguo zao walalie. Kaniambia no, Mami, mimi sitafanya hivyo. Mimi nitavaa nguo mingi kwa mwili so that when I move hazita move. Like nikuwe tu nimelala tu ni mimi na niko na nguo mingi. That's what he did. I have the photos. Na that night the small boy niliomba duvet or kind of a blanket kwa mtu hapo penye tulihamia, a new place now. Nikamfunikia nayo. He slept on the clothes. Na walihisi baridi sana. Kesho yake wote walikuwa wagonjwa. This time I don't have money. Pesa nilikuwa nayo, nimelipa nyumba. Wamegojeka. Mimi pia ni mgonjwa. What will I do? Even praying now, it's becoming an issue because you don't have even the energy. Kaambia, unajua nini? Mimi sina pesa ya kuwapeleka hosi. And I know you are sick. Juu walikuwa wamefungana. I think ni ile baridi. But we will pray. I know God. There's nothing that God cannot do. Sahi akili yangu imefungika, like I'm not thinking kama naweza pigia mtu, either a friend akuja tusaidie. Mimi ni kukaa.
And which year was that?
I can't 2.5 years ago.
Okay, 2023.
Yeah. 2023.
2024, around 2024 there.
We separated mwezi wa 4. Yeah.
Okay.
So watoto wako pale ni wagonjwa. Mimi niliwaambia tuleteni mikono tuombe. Na saa hiyo ni wagonjwa na wako na njaa. Akili haifikiri like I can even borrow someone 200 at least wakule. Tukalala that night. Second night. The third day. A friend of mine called me in the morning. Ile tu nakanga bila kuongea na mtu, akasema acha nipigie tu. Akasikia vile naongea I'm not okay. Kaniuliza, Grace, what is happening? Nikamwambia niko sawa. Kaniambia no, you're not okay. Can you tell me where you are? Nikuje. So I directed her to the new house. She came. When she came, akaniuliza, Grace, kwa nini uko kwa empty house? What is happening? I'm crying. Yani kumjibu inakuwa nataka kuongea because I need help. But again, it's too painful for me. Na wanauliza watoto, mmekula? Hapana. Ni nini shida? Dadi alibeba vitu. Haja kuja kutuona. So that lady akaniita kando, akaniambia, Grace, you cannot suffer and let the children suffer. Whatever happened, for them they are innocent. So allow me to help you penye nitaweza. Alienda huko akanunua food. Sijui hata masahani alitoa wapi because we had nothing. Kakuja na food akapea watoto. Na akaniambia, Grace, let me go. I'm coming back. Akaenda. Akakuja na mattress, duvet, na food. Na meko. Sufuria, some plates. Alikuja na mattress 2 na hizo duvets. So to me this point naona Mungu amesikia maombi because my children at least akutakuwa na ile cold sana. Na akakuja akapika. Kaniambia, Grace, sikuwa naweza kukula. Kaniambia, you need to eat something. You need to be strong for these children. Because wewe ukikuwa weak, baba yao ndio wameenda. Who will take care of them? At this point, hakuna hata school fees. They're not going to school. That time, my first boy, I remember for 2 terms hakusoma. He was in Form 1. Hakusoma. Not because sikutaka asome, but because I had nothing to do. Na sikutaka kupigia baba yake. It was done like, mimi hata nilimblock. I said, it's okay. Wacha ni assume he's normal. I face life myself because every time I try to forgive or to be good, nakuwa hurted. So I don't want that. For the sake of these children, I'll stay nitaka hivyo. So mtoto wangu hakusoma for 2 terms, but the small boy, I went to school because he was crying every time. I want to go to school. Nikaenda shule, nikajitetea, nikaongea na mwalimu, akamruhusu. So at least for him, he could go to school. All those terms, 2 terms, I never paid even a single coin. But the big boy, sikuweza. Nikimtetea 2 days after, siku ya 3 anafukuzwa. And I got tired. I said, wacha akae.
So has he been going to school?
No. Yeah.
Okay.
So mimi mambo ya shule hairdressing, I'm wondering whether to stop or to continue. Because now I don't have someone who will bring food for these children. But I said, let me at least struggle. I finish because it will help me somewhere.
True.
Even ndio nikang'ang'ana, I could go to school only when I have transport. Tusingekosa kununulia watoto. If I get 100 shilling, I'll buy food for the children. But ningangana hivyo, hiyo shule nilimaliza. I passed very well. And haikuwa rahisi kuimaliza, but I thank God nilimaliza, na hata nikashinda watu wenye walikuwa wanaenda kila siku. But now hizi tambili, my kid, the old boy alirudi nyuma sana. And I understand him because he's a big boy. He can understand things when I'm not okay. He know. Ndio alikuwa anashinda kuniambia, mami usijali.
How have you been living? How has life been after that? Have you spoken to him, to your ex-husband?
No. I haven't spoken to him. There's a day I met him on the road. He saw me. I don't know where he was going. He cannot reach out to me because I blocked him. So this particular day he saw me on the road. I was buying hair for my clients. And then he followed me. But when I saw him, I didn't have the energy to talk to him because I remembered everything. It was like it happened yesterday. I remembered the suffering. Children suffered. We could sleep hungry. We have spent the nights in the footbridge. If you know, pipeline footbridge. There's a day we slept there because the house was locked. Life was not easy. In fact, we are just here because of the grace of God. Because people could pay rent for us, even people who don't know us, just because of the children. Yeah.
So currently,
so when I finished the school, I started working at people's salons, and I started getting small money. And that's how I managed to take the son back to school. If I get 1,000, I'll take 800 to school. Then we ate the 200. But again, it wasn't enough because remember, there are two. I also need to pay for the other one. I also need to pay for the rent and for food. So from there, life is not easy for us. And now I do mobile because I cannot, I'm not able to put up a salon for myself. And I thank God because of that small money I get. At least I don't beg. There's a day I begged for food. There's a day I couldn't afford even 100 shillings. But it isn't easy. Yeah.
Now, why did you persevere for all those years?
I was expecting things to change. But unfortunately, they were not made to change.
Okay.
So it was like I was waiting for nothing. And in that waiting, it cost me so many things. Mentally and physically, I was affected. And emotionally. Because every time I sit down and remember all these things, I feel so bad. Yeah.
So sorry. Just allow me to ask you, you sound like a person who really values home and homemaking. Would you give love and marriage a chance?
To be honest with you, right now I don't know. It's not because I don't want to have a home or make a home. It's because I tried it. First time, it failed. Second time, it failed. I won't conclude on that because God can give me someone who will understand me as I understand him too. There are also good people out there. But sometimes I might fail to know or to identify the right person. And for that reason, I decided to stay alone and raise my children.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, at this point, give out your number so that anyone who can use your service of hairdressing and making of the nails can reach out to you.
Okay. My number is 0798 171390.
Registered as
Grace Muthoni Minor. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Grace, and we are very sorry for what you've gone through in those 15 years. It was not your wish. Your dream was to have a peaceful home, I believe.
Yes.
And we wish you the very best. We know things will change after having this conversation and aired and told us what you have been going through. But again, we congratulate you because you've taken yourself back to school. You now have a course. You have skills that you are doing or you're using to make a living. Yes. So keep it up.
Thank you.
And we wish you lots of wins in the years to come, and especially in this year, 2026.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you for this opportunity to share my story.
Yes.
It might help someone out there.
True.
Most especially those women who are going through.
Exactly.
Or who are in abusive marriages.
Yes.
I want to talk to you who is going through this. If you hear someone telling you something or threatening you of something, sometime, and in most cases, they mean it. So don't stay there until you die. If you see it is not working for you, because for me, I ignored. I can say that. Giving someone a second chance to come and spoil my good job that I was having. And again, add more traumas. I would advise someone, if something is not working, it cannot work. Even if you give it how many chances, it will not work. I'm also not telling people to leave their marriages because your marriage cannot be like mine. But stay where you feel you are fit.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And safety is important.
Yes.
Life and health is important.
Yes.
Thank you so much for those words, Grace, and we wish you the very best. We appreciate for your time and your confidence in our platform to share this story.
Thank you.
Someone out there has learned a lesson.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Tuko family, that's the story of Grace. What lessons have you picked from this conversation? You can tell from the way she is narrating that she is carrying a burden, an emotional burden. I hope that we'll walk with her even as she offloads this burden. My name is Kingori Wangeshi, and this has been an episode of Tuko Talks right here on Tuko. Thank you so much for watching.